Got a fever? Go to a doctor. Need one more degree to grab that dream job? Go to college. Feel caught up at home? Go for a walk. Sounds simple. Sounds doable. Doesn't it? But such are the tasks in present-day Afghanistan, which are indeed impossible. Welcome. Oh, you're certainly not welcome here. To one of the most dystopic and terrifying places on the face of the earth. Terror-governed Afghanistan. Where human rights? They don't exist. Where dreams die even before they are born. Another spectrum of the woman world, where their life is just like that of a war postcard. A visual bridge wherein women are stuck between the shackles of Taliban-controlled Afghan and a piped dream, a far cry called freedom. A life which was earlier protected by law and order now sees the same law and order collapse and collide with the ruins of their very own freedom. Welcome to your very own show, Women at War, the Afghan Focus. I'm your host Ishita, and I shall set out to cover stories from and around the women of Afghanistan to bring light to their atrocities by the terror of Taliban. On our very first episode today in Women at War, the Afghan Focus, I shall unravel to you the dark, the hidden, and the unexplored truth of the women of contemporary Afghan. But first, we follow the history of what made Afghanistan what it is today.
Taliban forces entered the heart of the Afghan capital, Kabul, today, the culmination of a rapid advance and retaking of control almost exactly 2 decades after they were ousted from power. Fighters were filmed inside the presidential palace after Ashraf Ghani, now the former president, fled the country.
After the Taliban seized over in Kabul, attacks on women's status started right away. The country lost access to a valuable reservoir of skill and knowledge when the Taliban shut down the women's university. And they made almost all of the women resign from their professional positions. In addition to severely enforcing a rigid dress code and limiting women's access to basic health care, it hindered the freedom of movement throughout the city. On this episode today, I shall bring out to you the story of the women of Afghan, by none other than the most important and revered women of Afghanistan today. They range from being journalists to politicians and social rights activists. So let's dive in and understand what it is being a woman from Afghanistan and living under the shackles of the terror-governed Afghanistan.
The Taliban coming, everything is changed.
Mariam is a women's rights advocate based in Afghanistan. In an interview with The Diplomat, she discussed the reality of life under the Taliban rule and how women are resisting And what should the world do to help? Mariam says that in her opinion, Afghan women are the bravest warriors in the history of mankind. On most of the public places being banned for women, which include gyms, jobs, parks, and beauty salons, Mariam says that since the successive orders of the Taliban have removed women from public spaces, only female doctors and midwives have the right to work outside the home in big cities. However, even though female doctors are allowed to work outside the home, they face severe restrictions because they must be present at work wearing a full hijab. They do not have the right to talk with male colleagues while working. In addition, they do not have the right to treat male patients. Because of fear, very few women are seen in public places. If there's a woman anywhere, she is accompanied by a man. But this is different in small towns. One can rarely see a woman on the road. When asked about how the women and girls are fighting back against Taliban's restrictions when it comes to education, Mariam says that in her opinion, the Afghan women are the bravest warriors in the history of mankind. As soon as the Taliban came to power, the first step was to ban the education of 6th grade girls. And later, they dissolved the Ministry of Women's Affairs, which is indeed one of the most important ministries in the government. They turned it into the Ministry of Vice and Virtue. There is a huge disappointment for women because it showed that women have no place in the Taliban government. But they did not give up. When the Taliban closed the door gates to the school students, Afghan women came to the roads of the cities and raised their voice of protest. Mariam also said that the girls took the responsibility of all sections of the society and stood alone against the Taliban and their weapons. And they asked the Taliban to open schools for their girls. But this is not their only struggle. In order to show that the restrictions imposed by the Taliban group on Afghan women are against their beliefs, they opened secret schools in their homes at the risk of their lives and their families. Later, when the Taliban also banned older female students from studying, Afghan women opened online classes. But a larger percentage of women do not have access to smartphones. So it is one of the biggest challenges which the present day Afghan women face. Another question that was asked to Mariam was that the Taliban's decision to ban older girls and women from education has received the most global attention. But they also have remade the curriculum for boys to emphasize their own regressive ideology. Is it possible for anyone, girl or boy, to receive a true education in Afghanistan? To this, Mariam said that Taliban in fact never changed. They're implementing all of the rules they did in 1996 to 2001. That is when they were in power before. Most people who had the opportunity to study in that period just remember horrendous memories from their education. Because it wasn't education. It was training more Taliban fighters. 20 years later, when they came again in power, they changed the curriculum under which students were students for the last 2 decades. Then the Taliban closed the door of schools and universities for women and children. One of the reasons is that they don't have the budget for expenses. However, they are building more religious madrasas across the country. According to their beliefs and religion, The students who graduate from these kind of religious schools operated by Taliban are not scholars but suicide bombers, killers, and dangerous criminals. They never learn to read and write correctly. They will be deprived of socialized and civilized etiquette. In the short term, they will hurt themselves. And in the longer term, they ruin the future of Afghanistan instead of building it. There was another question imposed to Mariam, which was that there is a lot of debate about what the international community can do to address human rights abuses in Afghanistan. Talking about the individual level, what can the concerned individuals living abroad do to help Afghanis? What message would Mariam like to send to the world on behalf of the women in Afghanistan? To which Mariam said that after 2 years of the Talibani rule, it seems like international human rights organization and women's rights organizations show less interest in the fate of women and girls in Afghanistan. She wants to ask any individual or organizations who claim that they are human rights or women's rights defenders to stand with them. While the Taliban and their supporters are trying to normalize the gender apartheid that women and girls are experiencing in Afghanistan, they do need the support and solidarity. The surge in suicide among women across the country of Afghan shows how difficult life has become for the women staying in Afghanistan. She also says that please do not ignore the Afghan women. She says, and I quote her, "Be our voice to recognize the gender apartheid in Afghanistan under the Taliban regime. Hold the Taliban accountable for their crimes against women and girls and humanity in Afghanistan." End quote. Now, here's the truth. Here's the catch. In an Economic Times interview with politician Fatima Gailani, Gailani mentions that here's the catch. In an Economic Times interview with Afghan politician Fatima Gailani, Gailani mentions the plight of what is the aftermath of corruption and how the Taliban crept under the land of Afghanistan. And here's what she had to say.
Corruption. Corruption is a worm which will eat anything from inside. It will look fine from outside, like a beautiful fruit. It will look beautiful from outside, but the inside will become hollow. This is exactly what happened in Afghanistan. And here, my complaint is not only for Afghan leaders. It is for the entire NATO. Why was it tolerated? Why when the corruption started at the beginning, why it was not stopped? It was still time to stop it. Because this person was a favorite of one, and the other person was favorite of the other, and it was tolerated. And this was the worm which made Afghanistan hollow from inside. If you see, we were in Doha. I was one of the 4 women in the peace negotiation team. When you could see that districts after districts will fall and soldiers will not fight, something is wrong. When the whole NATO was there and still we couldn't win peace, something was wrong there.
Are you saying that NATO, including the United States, allowed the corruption to flourish?
If I go mildly, I would say that they tolerate it.
Right. This is what the sad reality of Afghanistan is. Now, everyone knows what it is like being a journalist in the 21st century, be it the Israel-Gaza war or the life of Afghanis under the Taliban rule. Multiple of them are killed for voicing out the truth. Veteran television journalist Anisa Shahid is renowned for her uncompromising reporting on Afghanistan's corruption, brutality, and human rights violation. In the face of this injustice, Shahid has devoted her professional life to journalism. After the extremist organization retook the nation in 2021, her motivation has been rekindled.
Journalists cannot speak out against cases of poverty, murder, and corruption. Female journalists are not allowed to attend press conferences. No woman can openly show her face on media outlets. Almost 200 journalists have been arrested and tortured since the takeover. Sometimes I think leaving Afghanistan was my biggest mistake. I should have stayed and fulfilled my duty. Currently, Afghanistan's news is not among the headline of any world media and is not on the agenda of global superpowers. We need to understand that terrorist groups are growing in Afghanistan, and Al-Qaeda is waiting right behind the Taliban. I thank the International Center for Journalists for their support for freedom of speech, and once again, ask organizations that support the media to pay attention to journalists in Afghanistan, including women journalists.
The Taliban killed 7 colleagues of Shahid in a bombing several years ago, she noted in the PBS interview. She says, and I quote her, "I worked in Afghanistan for over a decade, in a country that was at war. In recent years, Afghanistan has been declared the bloodiest country for journalists," Shahid explained. In recent years, Afghanistan has been declared the bloodiest country for journalists, end quote. She also says that it is difficult to work in a country which is at war, especially for the women due to security problems, social problems, and familial problems. It makes lives difficult for them as a woman and a journalist. Shahid says, "The people of Afghanistan, especially women, live under the Taliban's shadow, under the group that violates the rights of the people." These are the words of Shahid, who was stationed in Kabul until her departure from the nation in 2021. Who doesn't know about Malala Yousafzai? Everyone does. We all know that Yousafzai narrowly escaped death at the age of 15 in Pakistan after being targeted by a gunman for advocating girls' education and opposing the actions of the Pakistani Taliban. After being awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace in 2014, Yousafzai is now 27 and has emerged as an international icon representing the strength of women against oppression. Here's what she thinks on the Talibanis taking over the land, heart, and soul of Afghan.
I'm shocked and I'm devastated by the news of ban on university education for Afghan women. But I'm not shocked. Girls have been prohibited from secondary schools for the last 1.5 years. And we have been doing our advocacy. We are calling for a response from world leaders that they must take it seriously, because we always feared that it would get worse, which is happening right now. It is getting worse for women. And this is 2 decades of progress that women in Afghanistan fought for. It was their activism that made it possible for them to get access to education, to get jobs, to be part of the parliament, to be part of everyday public life. And suddenly that public life is taken from them, that women are erased from the public life in Afghanistan.
But how does a militant group manage to rule a country now? Procurement of guns and arms and supply of terror can't come this easy. You need the source of funds to rule over a country again. By now, I'm sure all of you listening to this episode might wonder, how the hell do the Talibanis procure fundings? Where is this money coming from? The Taliban have long been thought to run a taxation system to cover their insurgent operations, including on the illegal drug trade. Now, here's the catch, guys. Afghanistan is the world's largest producer of opium, which can be refined to make heroin. Estimates of the Taliban's annual earnings from the illicit drug trade range between $100 million to $400 million. Now that is huge. When does all of this end? The ending of the terror-driven Taliban rule in Afghanistan requires a multifaceted approach. An approach that prioritizes international cooperation, support for Afghan democratic forces, humanitarian aid, and sustained diplomatic forces. By addressing root causes of extremism, promoting inclusive governance, and empowering Afghan citizens, especially the women, we can pave the way for a stable and a peaceful future where human rights are respected and terrorism finds no refuge. And when these strategies do get harnessed in real life, we can work towards dismantling the Taliban's grip on power and fostering a future where Afghani women find peace, stability, and human rights for a lifetime. Now, it's crucial for us as global citizens to continue these efforts with resolve and solidarity, ensuring that the women of Afghanistan can reclaim their path towards success, progress, and a lifetime of security. So this was what episode 1 was all about. Stay tuned for episode 2, which drops next Friday. Till then, stay safe, stay blessed, and let us all work towards a better world. Bye-bye.
تشبع وقع بعد